It is time. It is time to brew your best beer.
The 2016 SJPorr Challenge is dedicated to your friend and ours, Paul Wickstein. Brought to you by Brewcraft USA, iMake, Gladfield Malting, Yakima Valley Hops, The Grain Bill, Brewers Exchange, Cake Kingdom Homebrew Supply, Hiraki Homebrew, and a special thanks to our silver sponsors.
Welcome to my 2016 SJPorr Challenge US final review video. I'm going to do a Lamro 22 style, so all of the reviews are going to be down below, linked with the different codes and the timestamps. So check down there to check your review. And here we go. First up, we have the Bitch Session Pale. Classy name there for sure. When you know it's going to be a long one. Entry 96G79P44C. ABV is 4.5. Session APA IBU is 49. It's a blend of American 2-row, Munich Victory Special Roast, flaked oats, which explains the mouthfeel in the beer. Bitter with Centennial, flavored with Amarillo Gold, dry hops with Citra, and fermented with Mangrove Jack M10 Workhorse. So I'm just going to pour a little more into the glass, try to get some head build up there. On the appearance, when I first poured it had a massive head of off-white bubbles that stuck around for about this level, finally dissipated to a light cap in the glass, really good head retention, kind of an orange or light copper color, a little bit of haze in the appearance. On the aroma, I got a lot of tropical fruit up front, mango, orange, pear, light orange zest in there as well. Under that, I got under the hop aroma, I got kind of a caramel biscuit kind of aroma, really light. The hop aroma was kind of a moderate light level to begin with. Kind of dissipated fairly quickly there, but smelled very good. No yeast esters that I could detect, no off aromas that I could detect, and that was it for the aroma. Yeah, and the flavor really follows the nose very well. It kind of has a light tropical fruit, hop character to it, a little bit of orange, a little bit of mango, a little bit of apricot, a little bit of sweetness from the malt, a little caramel, biscuit sweetness in there. From the malt, you also get kind of a toasted bread crust that kind of lingers on the palate, lingers in the aftertaste. The bitterness is moderate low, I think, kind of balanced, really low, a little bit on the bitterness compared to the sweetness. The beer isn't cloying in any kind of way. Just you do pick up on the malt sweetness in the beer, and definitely a very soft bitterness to it. The hop flavor is, I think, kind of dying off a little bit in the beer. It's definitely there, but kind of becoming a little bit muted, a little bit muddled, a little bit, but still a very nice drinking beer. Mouthfeel on the beer is moderate high. The carbonation is also moderate high. I think the carbonation is a little bit too high for the style. Same with the mouthfeel. I'd like to see both of those come down just a little bit, make it a little bit more sessionable for session IPA. Other than that, it's really good in the mouthfeel area as well. So overall, this is a very well balanced session IPA overall. Just a hint more sweetness maybe than I would like, a little more mouthfeel and carbonation than I would like, and I think the hop character is starting to die off in the beer just a little bit. There's no oxidation that I'm picking up, so they did a really good job packaging this beer, and overall, very delicious stuff. I think they're gonna do well in this competition. Cheers. Next up, we have the Summer Amber IPA. This is an easy drinking mild IPA with for that thirsty afternoon when one just won't be enough. Ingredients: 2-row Crystal 60, Centennial hops and Cascade hops. ABV 4.5. The ID is 36T92P89Y. And I'm just going to top up my glass. I already filled out the score sheet, which is kind of the system that I feel works pretty well. for doing these reviews, write out the review, and then just kind of go over it in the video. Porr is a really nice, thick, moussey, light tan head that stays really well. Very good head retention. The bottom end of the bottle is getting a little bit cloudy. The first top half of the bottle was a lot more clear. So I'm going to go ahead and keep the points on clarity, because that's the way it would work in a BJCP competition usually, because we're only pouring like the first half of the beer. Up front right away, got a lot of raisin and plum, kind of a plum hop, slightly maybe ester. Maybe some of that's coming from the Crystal 60 is fairly heavily done on the Crystal. And I take back that earlier comment on the clarity. That was just my glass getting a little bit sweaty there. So yeah, a lot of raisin and plum up front, followed by a little bit of like a pine sol, piney lemon kind of a character to it. Also get hints of mango and apricot, some of those lighter stone fruits in there. Lots of fruity bread, like a fruity fruitcake or a raisiny muffin or something like that. Moderate level of a caramel sweetness as well, but the plum throughout the beer kind of remains like the dominant aroma in the beer for me. The flavor follows the nose pretty well. The plum isn't quite as dominant in the flavor. It's there, just a little bit kind of subdued. The caramel malts come forward more, so you get a lot of caramel sweetness, a little bit of like a sweet muffin kind of a character to it. Not cloying in any way, just the crystal malt is definitely popping its head through more than the hops are. On the hop area, you get a little bit of orange, a little bit of that apricot hop character from the Centennial and the Cascades. A little bit of orange in there as well. Might be a slight fruit ester from the yeast, but it's hard to tell, hard to differentiate that from the hops and the malts, the sweeter malts in this. There might be there's no oxidation from the crystal malt, which is good. The hop character does seem to be dying down a little bit in it. I imagine that the hop character is probably more forward when it was a fresher beer. Right now the crystal malts are definitely dominating, but the beer was packaged really well. There's no signs of oxidation in there. As far as mouthfeel goes, that's one of the aspects of this beer that I really like. It's kind of got a moderate to moderate high kind of mouthfeel, and as well on the carbonation. A little bit high on the carbonation, but balanced really well with the body, so that the mouthfeel and the carbonation go really well together. I think that was done really well. The bitterness is on the low side, balanced lightly against the sweetness of the beer, so that makes it very drinkable. And that's about it for the mouthfeel. Overall, this was a great beer, very well brewed. No flaws, no off flavors, no oxidation in it. The bitterness is fairly light, so it makes it really drinkable. I think that the hop character is kind of dropping off a little bit in it. I would have liked to see a little more hop character in it. But if you like kind of the maltier hoppy beers, this is a pretty good example of it. The other aspect is like I said, the body and the carbonation. Makes it feel like a bigger beer. Makes it really enjoyable to drink. A lot of flavor in it. And good job to whoever brewed it. Cheers. Alright, here we are with English Dark Mild, brewed with Colombian coffee and rye malt, fermented with 1968 Weisse yeast, original gravity 1044, final gravity 1012, ABV 4.2. So here we have a Dark Mild. In the appearance, when I first poured it, I had a really nice head on it, of kind of a light tan colored head that dissipated to a cap on the beer that pretty much stood there the whole session. So very good head retention. The color is kind of a dark, well, it's very dark, with a little bit of ruby highlights. There's some clarity in there as well, I think. Makes this a very attractive beer. The appearance I really like on it. The color and the slight kind of it's like a marble where you can kind of see into it, or like a colored glass or something like that. Really pretty. So on the aroma, when I first poured it, got a really moderate high level of coffee, kind of a light coffee aroma to it, along with pretty moderate high breadiness and a A little bit of a caramel sweetness in there as well. There was a little bit of a light nuttiness in the aroma that I picked up on early on. The coffee started to lean into like a sweet dark chocolate kind of a character, which made it really complex, really nice aroma. In the background, got a little bit of light bread crust as well. You could get just a hint maybe of an apple yeast ester. Really though, really full, beautiful, well-rounded aroma in this beer. No hop aroma that I could pick up on, and no off flavors that I could pick up on in the aroma. So right up front on the flavor, I get a light acidity that's a little bit distracting there. That acidity kind of goes away, dissipates pretty quickly, and turns into like a bready character, similar to what was in the aroma. It's a little bit muddier than it was in the aroma. Also, the coffee's not quite there. The coffee's kind of on the back end there. It's kind of a darker coffee in the flavor than it was than I interpreted it on the aroma, which is interesting. Get kind of a dark bread crust sort of character that lingers on the aftertaste, along with a very light caramel sweetness that kind of lingers a little bit. Makes you want to keep drinking the beer for sure. The bitterness is low, and there's a very light tea-like kind of hop character possibly in there as well. Very light apple yeast ester. No off flavors detected at all. On the mouthfeel, you get a nice rich creaminess. It's got a pretty moderate high level body to it, with kind of a moderate creaminess. Comes off almost like lactose, but not quite like that. Just a really nice mouthfeel on the beer. Carbonation is moderate low, perfect for the style. There might be a slight astringency up front due to that acidity. But other than that, the mouthfeel is really nice on the beer. So overall impressions on this, the aroma and the appearance of the beer are phenomenal, fantastic. The flavor didn't hold up quite to the expectation that I had based on the aroma. That acidity was a bit distracting to me. That might be due to pH from the coffee, and the dark malts might have lowered the pH a little bit. You might want to raise your mash pH a little bit, and maybe some chlorides might help out as well. Chloride additions in the mash water. The coffee character was very light at this point. It might be falling off, or it might just be masked by that little bit of acidity and the relatively complex, heavy malt bill. Might be kind of edging the coffee character out a little bit. So I'd like to see maybe a hint more coffee, or maybe just I'd like to taste it at a fresher point in time. But well, as the beer warmed up, the acidic bite kind of started to go away a little bit, but it's still there, still noticeable. So you're going to want to check on that mash pH possibly. Overall though, fantastic beer. Really like the malt selection in it. The malt character was very complex, and the mouthfeel was fantastic. So cheers to whoever brewed it. Next we have the light Belgian Blond. ID is 24S22U89V. ABV 4.2, IBU 23.4, OG 1040, final gravity 1008. Bottled 8/20/16. A light and refreshing lawnmower beer, brewed in the classic Belgian ale style, but featuring a smaller grain bill, the addition of carapils for mouthfeel, along with a substantial amount of dry hops to provide the aroma. And this was a nice little beer. I enjoyed it quite a bit. First thing on the appearance, it's got a really unique appearance to it. Very light, kind of like a light peach color with hues of pink a little bit. It's probably not coming through really well in the camera, but really interesting appearance there. It's got a very slight haze to it. When I first poured it, it had a really nice three-finger head of tight white bubbles, which dissipated to about a half-finger head on the beer. That's been lasting for a while now. On the aroma, you get a lot of the classic Belgian characteristics. You get that kind of a ripe peach, apricot, a little bit of just a hint of banana yeast ester. That's definitely dominating in there. Underneath that, you also get kind of like a bubblegum aspect. You can interpret those esters as a bubblegum, perhaps. Not that sweet, not as sweet as some of that bubblegum ester can come off. The beer does smell fairly dry. There's a light level of like an apricot flesh from I think the hops. It seems like a hop character. It's in there. You got to kind of dig for it, but it's there. There's a very light, earthy tea-like aroma as well. Not much malt character that I can pick up on, and no off flavors in the aroma. So up front, there's a very, very light sweetness to it that kind of accompanies the yeast esters. Now that sweetness is not cloying in any kind of way. It's very, very light. And the yeast profile is like a peach, bubblegum, a little bit of banana in there on the front of the palate, and then on the mid palate kind of turns into like a citrus hop note, followed by a little bit of light banana on the aftertaste a little bit. Up front, there's kind of also this diesel kind of character, and I think that's coming from the hops. Some people might interpret it as metallic, but I don't think it's metallic. I get it more in certain hops like Galaxy if you use too many, or Summit, or some of those kiwi hops a little bit. Can produce like this diesel character that can be temporary, I think. But you definitely get that there in this a little bit. The beer finishes with light bitterness and an earthy tea-like kind of aftertaste. The diesel kind of lingers in there as well on the flavor. The mouthfeel is moderate. The carbonation is moderate high. The carbonation is perfect for the style. Carbonation does kind of help to bring out that diesel a little bit more, and as the beer warms, that kind of goes away. And I'm really harping on this diesel thing, but it's a very minor flaw in the beer, probably the only flaw in the beer, which I'll get to in the overall feedback. But mouthfeel, yeah, high carbonation, moderate body from the carapils, which is really nice. So a fantastic mouthfeel on the beer as well. So overall impression is that this is an exceptionally well brewed beer, especially with the yeast ester profile. I really, really like that yeast ester profile, and I can appreciate it because it's not that easy to get. A really balanced yeast ester out of a Belgian ale yeast sometimes. A lot of times those esters will get out of control one way or the other, too much banana, too much peach, too much something, or there's not enough attenuation, so the sweetness kind of doesn't work real well in the beer. That doesn't have any of that. So as far as the Belgian ale yeast fermentation goes, it was spot on. The one piece of feedback that I have is regarding that diesel. I think that it comes from the hops. If it does, maybe try backing down on the dry hop a little bit, or try using a different hop. Other than that, though, this is a fantastic beer. Really interesting aroma, or appearance as well as aroma. So cheers, and great job to whoever brewed this one. Next up, we have the dry hopped passion fruit Berliner Weisse 63F 94C 46E. 3.5 ABV, 0 IBU, no boil. New school style Berliner Weisse, very classy. Appreciate that. Kettle sour with probiotics, no boil, 0 IBU, passion fruit added to the end of primary. Big dry hop of Citra and Mosaic. Best enjoyed a little warmer than fridge temps. This is a fantastic beer. I'm going to start off with that right away. Really quick, in the appearance, you get a really nice light yellow with a slight haze to it. I did pour out the entire contents of the bottle into the glass at once. Most of the haze came from the very bottom part of it, although I think it was keg conditioned. Still, there's some settling in there. So, but you get a light haze in there, which I think is appropriate for the Berliner Weisse style. It originally poured with a good 2-finger head, which dissipated to about a 1/2-finger head. That's really been lasting. Very impressive on a kettle sour beer. I'm assuming that you probably lowered your pH during your kettle souring process to gain that head retention. Good job on that. In the aroma up front, you get a lot of passion fruit, but it's really dynamic, complex aroma in this beer. So you get a lot of passion fruit up front, and followed by a lot of lemon and orange and guava, maybe a little bit of a melon in there as well. Underneath that, you might get a slight kind of a doughiness character from the malts, probably from the lack of the boil. Really complex, very juicy, very refreshing aroma, fantastic. On the taste, the sourness, is pretty light. It's pretty light. I'd say if I was going to guess on the pH range, maybe like a 3.6, 3.7, something in there. Not super sour, maybe a 3.5, something like that. There's a light tartness in there, moderate level of like a mango and a passion fruit, followed by maybe complemented by strawberry, hints of lemon zest. I even think I get maybe just a hint of like a coconut or something in there too, like a creaminess almost. There is also a light doughiness in the malt character, hints of melon and mango. It's a really complex character, which you kind of get with that passion fruit and the dry hop. Really well balanced as well, so you can pick up on all of these nuances, and none of them really stick out, really heavily. Not even the passion fruit, which can be kind of an overwhelming fruit to use. So very well balanced, lots of different fruit character in the beer, and no off flavors to speak of. There might be just a very slight bitterness to it, probably from the dry hop. Dry hopping does give you a little bit of bitterness in IBU. So you get a little bit of that, which is a nice balance to the kind of fruity character. It's not sweet at all, very dry beer, finishes very dry, and that's it for the flavor. But on the mouthfeel, I would give it about a moderate mouthfeel. It's definitely not thin, maybe moderate light. The carbonation is probably the only thing that's wrong with the beer. It could use a bump up in carbonation. I think that carbonation would also help bump up some of the flavor, would help clean the palate out a little bit. It's a very minor flaw in the beer, but unfortunately I think that the higher carbonation would have made such a huge difference in the beer overall, the way that the beer tastes. So the carbonation in it does affect the overall beer a lot. That's just my opinion. I could be wrong on that, but next time you brew the beer, I'm assuming you can condition it, try to bump up that carbonation if you can. So overall on this beer, fantastic kettle sour beer. Excellent example of the kind of American Berliner Weisse style. Very clean, very complex, very good balance of hop and fruit character together. A lot of passion fruit, a lot of mango, a little bit of citrus, not too much, but just enough to keep it really interesting and complex. Again, bump up the carbonation. Mouthfeel was really good. And I think this beer would be a great competitor in like a BJCP competition. So cheers and fantastic job to whoever brewed this one. Alright, we're on a roll here for the sour beers. Next up is a Berliner Weisse. This is 56Z, 78T, 53W. Let's see, we got some stats here. 3.8% alcohol. Kettle sour, traditionally hopped wheat beer, intentionally left in the raw with no fruit added. This style will and can be served with a shot of flavored syrup. However, I prefer the clean wheat and Pilsner balance with a mild sourness. And no, I did not add any syrup to it. Although that's a very cool suggestion in the description. I can definitely appreciate that. So here we have a nice Berliner Weisse. When I poured it, had a nice one-finger head of pretty tight white bubbles. It's kind of dissipated to just a ring around the glass, but it was fairly well standing. Dissipated pretty slowly, so good head retention on it. It's kind of a light golden, dark yellow kind of a color, slight haze to it. Overall, a very pretty beer. So the overall aroma in this beer is kind of a canned or cooked apricot or cooked peach, kind of a character to it. Underneath that, you might get a little bit of citrus, maybe a little bit of fresh stone fruit in there, some moderate pear esters in there as well. I can't pick out any hop aroma. It might very well be there in that fruitiness kind of mixed in, but I can't really zero in on that. So if it's there, it's blended very well. There's a very light level of sweet breadiness from the malts, really light level, but it's in there. You can dig for it. For the flavor on this beer, it's a very light tartness, very approachable for people who are not used to sour beers. Just tart enough to make it interesting, make it refreshing. The flavor, though, is still again dominated by that cooked peach and cooked apricot kind of character to it. It's not quite as dominant in the flavor as it was in the aroma. So you get also a little bit of citrus in there, maybe a little bit of mango to kind of balance out some of the cooked peach kind of a character that this beer has. There's also a slight hop bitterness in it, which I appreciate. That helps balance out some of those yeast esters, some of the lactic acid bacteria esters, the fruity character that the lactic acid created, lactic acid bacteria. I can also pick up on just a slight level of like a tea or earthy hop character to it. The beer is very clean, free of any major off flavors. There's a light sweetness up front, and the beer dries out really well on the aftertaste. Mouthfeel is perhaps a moderate light, not thin by any means. Carbonation is about moderate. Carbonation could come up a little bit for style. I think it's good where it is for this particular beer. For style, judges are going to be looking for high carbonation on the Berliner Weisse. But other than that, it has really good mouthfeel to it as well. So overall, this beer is a good example of a clean kettle sour. It does have that cooked kind of stewed peach kind of character or apricot, which I'm not a big fan of. I did score it down a little bit for that. It is an interesting character. It's not offensive, but it's also not something that I really like either. So mouthfeel and carbonation are good. Carbonation could come up a little bit for style. Overall, though, very clean, well done beer, very approachable, not too sour. I really like the balance of the bitterness. That's a neat take on a kettle sour that you don't see a lot, because people generally don't use hops in their kettle sour beers. That also probably limited the tartness of the beer, which is good if that's what you're going for. So cheers and good job to whoever brewed this. Next up, we have the Chocolate Caramel Oatmeal Stout, 3.2 ABV. Please let this stout warm to room temp, which is what I did. This beer was very nice, definitely on the more desserty side of the sweet stout style. Appearance, it poured a pretty thick 2-3 finger head of tan colored bubbles that were tight and big bubbles as well, kind of looked like a root beer float head to it. The head dissipated slowly to a cap on the beer, which has remained throughout the session. The beer is very, very dark with just very light ruby highlights in it, but otherwise very much black. Very nice looking, appealing looking stout. Also, when you kind of swish it in the glass here, you can see the viscosity of the beer right away, which is really nice in a 3.2% ABV beer. On the aroma, when I first poured the beer, and now after it's been sitting for a while and I've been sipping on it, up front you get a lot of cocoa and a lot of chocolate. Similar to like a Tootsie Roll kind of a character to it in some ways. There's also moderate vanilla creaminess in the aroma that kind of gives that Tootsie Roll aspect, with a faint hint of a raspberry ester in there on the back end of the aroma. Also comes off as kind of like a sweet breakfast cereal, this beer, like a Cocoa Puffs or something like that. No hop aroma detected, no off flavors detected. As the beer sits, the raspberry, kind of a berry-like dark, maybe dark red berry kind of a character, started to come out a little bit more. I think that was a yeast ester. It's very interesting in the beer. The flavor of this beer is quite nice. It's definitely on the sweeter side of the style, the sweet milk stout up front, but not cloying. It still dries out on the end of the palate, so in no ways is it under attenuated or anything like that, just on the sweeter side of the style. Up front, I get a little bit of a tartness to it, probably the darker malts in there. The tartness does go away as the beer warms up, but it's still noticeable. That might be due to water profile or pH of the mash. You get a lot of the cocoa and the chocolate in there. You also get just a hint of that raspberry ester too, so it follows the nose very well. The vanilla kind of lingers on the aftertaste. So does the chocolate and the cocoa. In fact, I think the chocolate and the cocoa kind of come more in on the mid side of the palate and the end. They're very light. I want to say that the vanilla and the cream, the milkiness of the lactose there is it's definitely up front, but it's not one-dimensional. It's definitely on the like a sweet chocolate side of things, very much like a Tootsie Roll. Although a little bit more on the vanilla end of things. The vanilla also kind of carries through on the aftertaste. Didn't pick up on any hop flavor. Very light hop bitterness in there, not much at all, and no off flavors to speak of as well. And just as the appearance suggests, the mouthfeel is very viscous. This is probably the most viscous beer in the challenge that I've had so far. Quite nice at a 3.2% ABV. So really rich mouthfeel, very viscous, a little bit sticky on the back end. Just enough carbonation to clean that up and make you want to take another sip. Very nice mouthfeel. There might be just a hint of an astringency up front from that tartness. It's not too bad though. Just one little nitpicky thing to point out, but otherwise fantastic mouthfeel on it. I really like the viscosity that was achieved in this beer for such a low ABV. Overall, this is a fantastic example of a sweet stout that's on the sweeter end of the spectrum of that style. The cocoa would probably put this in a spiced vegetable category. I thought that the cocoa was a little bit low, so I would have declared it as just a sweet stout or milk stout and just not even mention the cocoa, because the cocoa is just a little bit low. When you declare it, then the taster is really going to search for it, and it's in there, but I think it's a pretty low level. Just adds to the chocolate character of the chocolate malts just a little bit. The viscosity was very nice in the beer. Really nice mouthfeel, really nice moderate low carbonation. The only other thing was that light tartness, a little bit of astringency. You could try bumping up the mash pH a little bit, see if that helps. As the beer warms, it's still noticeably there. So, but overall, fantastic example of a sweet stout with cocoa nibs. Cheers. Alright, next up we have the sour peanut butter stout, 24R 83U 34T, 4.45% ABV. This is a peanut butter stout. The beer is a low ABV version of my stout. I use mostly 2-row and black patent chocolate and roasted barley malts. I add peanut butter extract as secondary, minimal hops or just for bittering at 60 minutes. And this was very fun beer. On the aroma, when I poured it, it has a really moderate heavy, definitely more on the moderate heavy side, heavy maybe Reese's peanut butter, kind of a peanut butter aspect to it, kind of like the, I would assume it's an extract peanut butter. It reminds you of the real salty inside of a Reese's peanut butter cup. Followed by undertones of sweet milk chocolate, a little bit of caramel. There's also a light plum ester in there as well. I didn't pick up on any hop aroma, and I didn't pick up on any off aromas either. On the appearance, when I first poured it, I did give it a pretty aggressive pour. I like to give my beers an aggressive pour, try to build a head on these things. Give them a chance. This one got a big chance, and about half the glass was head of kind of a nice tan, maybe light tan colored head. Looked kind of like the head of a root beer. When I first poured it, the head dissipated very slowly, had really good lasting head retention. The beer is dark with ruby tones around the edges of the glass. On the flavor, the peanut butter character was a lot different. At first I kind of got like a moderate, light, sweet peanut butter, like Jif, you know, or yeah, one of those sweeter kind of peanuts. Definitely a peanut character to it. It's very light. Get just a little bit also of that Reese's peanut butter in there as well. It's kind of I describe it as like a darker, more bitter peanut butter, if that makes sense. Very, very light though, both of those aspects. I got a moderate level of sort of like a vanilla banana-ish kind of a thing. I think probably is coming from the peanut butter extract. Not an isoamyl acetate, or what you get from yeast, but because it's not quite banana, not quite vanilla, somewhere in between, a little bit nutty. as well. There's light undertones of dark chocolate, coffee, along with moderate level of sweet breadiness, as well as a dark toasted bread crust. Very nice complex malt bill on this beer. There's light level of a plum and raisin ester in there, just to make things, you gotta dig for it, but it's there, just makes things a little more interesting. There's also just a light tartness up front from those dark malts, not too astringent though. The beer finishes with a dark roast, kind of like a dark roasted coffee in the aftertaste. Bitterness from the hops is very light, but balanced well with the little bit of bitterness from the peanut butter extract, and the dark malts. Those elements of bitterness balance well with the overall sweetness of the beer, making the beer very, very well balanced and very drinkable. Mouthfeel is really fantastic on this beer. I would say it's probably moderate, maybe moderate high kind of a mouthfeel. Moderate carbonation, which I like. If it had a lower carbonation, it'd just be a little bit too sticky sweet. The beer still leaves you with an aftertaste of stickiness, but that just makes you want to come back for more. As you drink it, the carbonation does kind of dance off the tongue, as a main brew guy would say, and kind of helps clear out the palate just enough to keep you interested. Does not make the beer too cloying, along with the bitterness that helps with that. So overall, the mouthfeel is fantastic on the beer. So overall impression, this is a pretty good peanut butter stout. I like the stout portion of it better than the peanut butter. I thought the peanut butter was just a little bit low in character. It might be settling out in the beer now. I'm assuming it probably wasn't a rebrew. The malt character in the beer is fantastic. Very, very good balance of dark and sweet caramel, along with a little bit of plum and raisin esters in there. Really nice balance of bitterness and sweetness. Get hints of bitter chocolate, hints of coffee, hints of everything. But the problem is that the peanut butter is just a little bit light. I would like it to be a little more in the flavor. It was really nice in the aroma, but didn't carry through quite as well in the flavor. But overall, fantastic beer. No flaws in the beer as far as off flavors go. So great job on this. Maybe try some different peanut butter extracts, or maybe a combination of different peanut butter extracts. I don't know anything about peanut butter beer, so anyway, that's my feedback. Cheers and thanks. Alright, final beer for the SJPorr Challenge US Finals 2016. We have 86H99W32N, and this is a Tart Saison with Beets, 4.2 ABV, and it reads on the bottle here and on the website. What you have is a lightly tart, kettle-soured, refreshing summer Saison with beets added to bring earthiness, complexity, and a crazy beautiful color. The first sip may be unlike anything you've had before, and if so, give your palate some time to adjust. By the end of the glass, you'll be wishing you had a whole keg. Cheers. Very good advice indeed. Alright, so here we have this beer, which is definitely very pretty in appearance. When I first poured it, it had a good 3-finger head of white with a little bit of pink hue to it on the head, both thick and big bubbles. It held in there pretty quickly, pretty good head retention. The color of the beer is kind of a reddish pink, a little bit of orange hues to it. Very, very pretty indeed. It is hazy as well, and that's it for the appearance. Up front on the nose, I get a pretty moderate light level of like a cherry and raspberry and a citrus ester to it. Really complex aroma there. There's also pretty moderate, maybe moderate high level of butyric acid. That's kind of getting in the way of detecting the other aromas in the beer. I also get some light, like an earthy citrus kind of a note in there. It was really interesting. There's also a very light level of spicy phenol in there. After the beer sits for a few minutes, there's kind of this donutty kind of a malt character, like a sweet, fluffy malt aroma to it. No hops detected, no in the aroma anyway, and other than that butyric acid, it had a very complex, very nice aroma. So on the flavor, definitely kind of dominated by the beets, but just barely. There's a lot going on in the beer, other than just the beets. There's kind of a supportive peach, mango, maybe some dry hay kind of characters underneath that underneath the beet character. There's just kind of a light level of acidity, not super sour, very approachable for people who aren't into drinking sours. The aftertaste leaves kind of a creamy sort of flavor that's really interesting. The beets provide a light sweetness to the beer as well, just a light sweetness. I wouldn't say it's cloying in any kind of way. Just a little bit on the sweeter side. The butyric acid on the flavor is light, but it's still detectable. The beets provide a juicy sort of character that follows the full length of the palate from the beginning to the end to the aftertaste. That beet character is really, really nice. It's not overdone. I would say it's kind of moderate light in the beer. I might have said moderate at first, but it's more like moderate light. Not overpowering in any kind of way, but it's definitely there. You can definitely pick it out. That juicy character that it provides is very nice. The malt character is kind of a low level of a doughy sort of malt character that's in there if you're looking for it. I got no hops in the flavor. Not much bitterness. Don't know if there's any bittering hops in this at all. There might not be. I did get a bit of a bitter phenol, just a hint of a bitter phenol up front that kind of adds to the complexity of the beer. On the mouthfeel is I would say moderate, probably with a moderate level of carbonation too, maybe moderate high. It definitely has a pretty thick mouthfeel actually, maybe moderate high mouthfeel. It's got a lot of slickness to it. It's got a lot of depth to the mouthfeel. It's got just enough carbonation to help clean out the palate a little bit. You definitely have a little bit of a sticky aftertaste in it, but overall, pretty good mouthfeel. Overall impressions: the character from the yeast, the lactic acid bacteria, and the beets provides for very tasty, very complex beer. The mouthfeel and the sweetness might be a little bit too much for the Saison style. Unfortunately, if you're talking BJCP, they don't really have a place for these kinds of beers, so you might want to put it under like American mixed culture, mixed sour, whatever it is. Unfortunately, there's not a really good space for it. That said, I really like the beer, even though it might not be in character for a Saison. I like the mouthfeel a lot, and that little bit of sweetness from the beets is nice. So that's something to be aware of if you're looking to enter it into a BJCP competition. I wouldn't enter it in as a Saison. So the only real issue with the beer is that it has a light level of butyric acid. The butyric acid would be coming from the kettle souring process. You're going to want to watch your sanitation during that time. Bring the wort to a boil before you add your lactic acid bacteria. Don't do the 180 degree pasteurization. Go ahead and bring it to a boil. You want all the sides of your kettle to be pasteurized. You want all the air to be pasteurized. You want the lid to be pasteurized. Any little contaminant in there can cause butyric acid off flavors. And also, if you're souring for say 2 or 3, 4 or 5 days, you want to cut that down to 2 days max. 1 day preferably, less than 24 hours if you can. Try probiotics or the Omega Labs lactic acid blend. Those have been shown to sour pretty quickly if you can keep them up in the 90 degrees. And with the plantarum, Lactobacillus plantarum, you can also kettle sour. It's a little bit slower, but at room temperature. But if you bump up the temp, you can speed it up a little bit. So, but other than that, fantastic beer. I love the beet character in that, and I might give Beets a try myself in some of my sours. Cheers. Well, that's it for my SJPorr Challenge U.S. Final Beer Reviews for 2016. Good luck to all the entrants. These beers were all very good beers. I did have a couple of favorites. I had a couple that I thought weren't bad, but a couple that might have had a couple of minor flaws in them, and so I scored pretty clumped together. I didn't do any wide scoring, if that matters to anybody. Everything was pretty much in the 30s, low to high 30s, maybe mid-high 30s, something like that. But anyway, that was a fun experience. I'm not sure if I'll do it again next year or not. I'll have to think about it. We'll see what it is. Thanks again to the Hub guys, Lamro22 and SJPorr, and cheers. Thanks for watching.
It is time. It is time to brew your best beer.
The 2016 SJPorr Challenge is dedicated to your friend and ours, Paul Wickstein. Brought to you by Brewcraft USA, I Make, Gladfield Malting, Yakima Valley Hops, The Grain Bill, Brewers Exchange, Cake Kingdom Homebrew Supply, Hiraki Homebrew, and a special thanks to our silver sponsors.